Welcome to another episode of Positive Leadership. And this is going to be a podcast about effective communications. But it's not going to be just another podcast about the importance of effective communications. The world is full of magazines, books, and articles that talk about the need for effective communications. Now, today we're going to peel back that generalization just a little bit and talk about two of the most vital aspect of communications for a leader, the ability to write and speak well. These two essential skills can either accelerate your leadership career like a SpaceX launch or sink your career faster than a torpedo can sink a battleship. I have witnessed countless number of people in management careers that never go beyond the first tier of management simply because they could not write or speak well. Many of them had even done well in prestigious universities and were highly intelligent, but they never mastered the art of writing or speaking, and they never mastered the art of communications, and their careers failed on the launch pad. To be a great leader, you can't just master the fundamentals. You have to be good at this trade craft. If you're going to lead and influence people in the digital age, you can't have fundamental obstacles like poor writing or the inability to speak in public trip you up. Being known as someone who can't communicate will put a lid on your career advancement as a leader or manager. So let's talk a little bit about writing first. How does one become an effective writer? Well, unfortunately for most of us here in the West, we start off entering the workforce with a huge writing handicap. Why? Because learning the ins and outs of the English language is very poorly accomplished in most primary schools. At least in America, it's not taught very well at all. Before I was in the 9th grade in high school, my worst subject was English. The lessons were dry, boring, and it was just a chore to even get a passing grade. Oh, how I hated English. That was until I was taught by an English teacher with a real passion for the language. She was so passionate about it that she inspired the entire class to learn to love the English language. How? Well, not by teaching endless boring lectures about how to identify the parts of a sentence or how to diagram sentence structure. No, her gift to us was the gift of reading. She inspired us to become passionate readers, which is what happened to me. By having us read some of the great classics, she inspired us to explore the world through classic literature. In doing so, not only did I let some of these authors capture my imagination, but by reading a lot, I was absorbing lessons on what it meant to write well. Lessons that I was able to carry over to my professional life. Now, during my time that I was in the United States Air Force, I attended many leadership schools, first as an enlisted non-commissioned officer, then later as a lieutenant, then as a captain. All of these schools emphasized the need for effective writing as leaders, and the U.S. Air Force put together some very good effective writing material. From all this training, I learned that an effective writer has to learn how to write like you talk. As a leader, so much of your day is spent in writing that it has to come almost a second nature to you. In our digital age, it seems like that we're always sending emails, text messages, and tweets back and forth during the day to get our work done. And as leaders and managers, we don't have the extra time to try and decipher a poorly written email or text message. Now, as important as effective writing is to a leader, being known as a good public speaker is even more essential to your leadership career. I can tell you from my many years in leadership positions that it's very hard to know when you will ever be called upon to give a presentation to your peers, your clients, or your boss. It can be at the last second. And the last thing you want to be known for is your inability to give good presentations on demand. This one fact will definitely put a cap and seal on your management and leadership aspirations quicker than most people realize. Yet, this is an area where even some of the best people struggle. The fear of public speaking is really pretty fairly common, and it affects about 75% of the general population. Why? because the fear of failing as a speaker is very closely tied to anxieties related to embarrassment and rejection. Many times, we have had a very bad experience early in our formal education, like being called upon in primary school to come in front of the class and give a book report that there's no way we're prepared for, and as a result, suffered shame and ridicule. Unfortunately, these early unpleasant experiences tend to stick with us, and this fear of public speaking becomes a full-blown phobia by the time we're adults. So, how do you break the phobia? Well, in 3 words: practice, practice, and practice. For me, it was as simple and as difficult as placing myself in a position where I absolutely had no choice but to improve. It really was a sink or swim situation. I was put in a position where I was going to have to speak in front of 20 to 30 people almost every single day. You see, the Air Force had selected me to go to Keesler Air Force Base as an electronics instructor. It was a non-volunteer position, and the Air Force gave me only 2 options: either to become an electronics instructor or get out of the Air Force altogether. As I wasn't financially prepared to leave the Air Force, I really had no other option but to take the instructor position. It was one of the very best things that ever happened to me professionally. It put me on the path to becoming a really good public speaker. Well, after several years of being an electronics instructor, I had the opportunity to finish my bachelor's degree, and once I finished my college degree, I applied for and was accepted to the Air Force Officer Training School to become commissioned as a second lieutenant. The 90-day school was as much of a fitness to become an officer exam as it was a prep school. We were expected to meet some pretty high standards to qualify as commissioned officers. During the time we were in the program, we were given several exams every week to test our physical, emotional, and intellectual readiness to become officers. Included in these exams were weekly exams that measured our ability to write coherently and to speak in front of an audience. It was a grueling experience, but the years that I had spent as an instructor left me well prepared to pass all the writing and speaking exams. Fast forward several years, and I was presented with an opportunity to make a decision presentation to a 3-star Air Force general that was going to require the use of all of my presentation skills. So you see, this 3-star general about a year earlier had commissioned me to lead a small team of consultants to look at a very thorny logistics issue and recommend changes that would help eliminate the problem. He had sent us out with some strong guidance that reflected his personal biases in this area. Now, here I was a year later, preparing to tell him that, as noble as his ideas were, our team could see no way to practically implement them. In fact, it was worse than that, because if the Air Force tried to implement the solutions that reflected his biases, they were going to make the problems worse. Well, this was such an important briefing that I had to rehearse it in front of my supervisors twice, while a team of fellow officers tried to prepare me for every possible point of contention that the general might raise. So I was ready, but I was also nervous. Nevertheless, this was the culmination of years spent making public presentations in many different venues with different audiences. When I got to the most contentious parts of my presentation, as expected, the general was raising all types of objections, as we had anticipated. But because I was so well prepared, I was able to answer all of them with a style, a grace, and a flair that even I didn't know I had. Well, after he had asked his last question, we all sat there in a very uncomfortable period of silence while the general stewed over his options. We could tell that he was not happy, that he would not be able to implement any of his pet programs. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he spoke. You know, I absolutely hate it when my junior officers know more about a subject than I do. I guess you're right, Captain. I guess we'll just have to press on as is right now, even though I don't like it. Anyway, good job, Captain Martin. I was elated. Not only had I survived, but I had done well. Something also very unusual happened that day. I lost all, and I do mean all, traces of fear of speaking to anyone anywhere for any reason. Not only have I lost my fear of public speaking, but I've actually developed a real passion for speaking in public. Well, since that time, I've given university lectures, I've been invited to speak in front of large crowds, and even briefed senior-ranking officials at the highest levels of the U.S. federal government. Now, I'm using all of these personal examples in my life to illustrate how much you can achieve by learning to write well and speak well. And unfortunately, and sadly, it's a fact of life that the opposite is also true. Your inability to express yourself with the written word and your fear of speaking in public will become great obstacles to career advancement in almost any field, but especially in professional endeavors. Most jobs in today's knowledge-based economy require the ability to communicate well, and that means the ability to write well and speak well. When managers look at who they will hire or promote, your writing and speaking skills may not be at the top of their list, but if you present a poorly written resume or don't do well in an interview or are known to have poor writing or speaking skills, I guarantee you that you won't get hired or you won't get that promotion. How do I know? Because I've been in situations where I have turned down an otherwise qualified candidate because I didn't think they had the required writing or speaking skills that I knew that they were going to need for the job. I cannot over-communicate this point. Your inability to write or speak well will severely limit your career advancement opportunities, especially in today's knowledge-based economy. So if you feel you're weak in either area, start right now to take steps to remedy this situation. Start reading a lot of books by the best novelists. Ironically, this will teach you how to write. If public speaking is your weak area, consider joining Toastmasters International, the largest professional public speaking club in the world. Even though I've had years of public speaking experience, I still retain membership in Toastmasters and occasionally attend their meetings to keep my speaking skills current. Writing and speaking are vital soft skills to your success as a leader. Perform them poorly, and your career will quickly hit a brick wall. Perform them well, and you will find that your career will be filled with endless possibilities. I'm Dr. Dave Martin, and this has been another episode of Positive Leadership. I'll talk to you again very soon.